Jamin Marshall. Jamin is the tour logistics coordinator at Punk Rock Saves Lives. Please welcome Jamin Marshall, a seasoned musician and advocate within the music community. Introduced to punk rock during a transformative school trip to Washington, D.C., Jamin's passion led him to create the band Larry and His Flask with his younger brother after battling cancer at 18. With a strong DIY ethos, the band quickly rose from basements to international stages like Warped Tour and Riot Fest. Since their disbanding in 2019, Jamin has continued his music career through Marshall Music and supports Punk Rock Saves Lives as their tour logistics expert. Today, Jamin leverages his extensive journey from DIY musician to performing at international festivals to provide valuable insights on how the music community can better support the mental health and sobriety needs of performers, crew members, and attendees amidst the unique pressures and environments that they face. So if we could take a moment to welcome Jamin. Great. We also have Kiersten Kummerow Brown. Kiersten is the community educator at the Blue Bench. She joined the Blue Bench in April 2023 as a passionate community educator. She travels across the Denver metro area to middle and high schools, leading workshops that empower young people to prevent sexual violence. Her sessions focus on fostering healthy relationships, teaching boundary setting and consent, and promoting safe intervention strategies. Kiersten's dedication to this vital work shines through in her constant quest to innovate and expand awareness. Today, Kiersten will be sharing ways that music lovers and artists can act as active bystanders within the community. If we could welcome Kiersten. Next, we have Jessica Wallach. She is the accessibility coordinator for the Underground Music Showcase, a lifelong disability and accessibility activist, photographer, and arts educator from Greater Depth Media. Jessica has been working on accessibility for 40 years. In the last few years, she has turned her attention to festivals, working with people all over the country on how to make events more accessible and meeting people right where they are. Jessica's journey led her to create her own disability program at Cornell University's City and Regional Planning School, driven and focused on the question, for whom are we making cities accessible? Her work is a testament to making space a love letter to the body through art. Today, Jessica joins us to share her unique perspective and insights on accessibility and inclusion. Can we please welcome Jessica? And last but definitely not least is Melissa Ivy, AKA MZIV. They are a musical doula. Sorry. They are a dynamic and multidimensional artist from Denver, Colorado, and a board member at Bodies of Culture, a local organization dedicated to promoting equity in the music industry. Bodies of Culture offers BIPOC open mic nights, a mentorship program for BIPOC musicians, and hosts an annual concert series at Levitt Pavilion called Sunday Sounds. Melissa identifies as a disabled queer Two-Spirit and Taino, bringing a rich diversity of perspectives to their work as a musician, composer, birth worker, educator, and event producer. With a musical career spanning the globe, Melissa has graced over thousands of stages, including memorable performances at Red Rocks Amphitheater. Today, Melissa will use their experience with Bodies of Culture, along with their own personal experience, to share how we can support BIPOC musicians. Can we give it up for Melissa? So Creating inclusive and safe spaces in the music community is crucial for fostering creativity, belonging, and respect among all participants. It ensures that everyone, regardless of background or identity, feels valued and able to express themselves authentically. Inclusive spaces not only attract diverse talent, but also encourage collaboration and innovation, enriching the musical landscape with a variety of perspectives and experiences. By prioritizing safety, accessibility, and inclusivity, the music community can set a positive example, promoting equality and unity both on and off stage. So, I actually have a question for everyone. If each of y'all could respond, what would you say are the most significant barriers that folks from various backgrounds faced in the music community? And how do these challenges affect their ability to thrive?
Oh, coming in hot with the mic first. Okay. As a musician from Denver, who's grown up here for the past over 20 years as a musician, I think my first show here was in 1999. So the barriers have changed dramatically. And I really want to talk about the houselessness situation and really focus on that. Because as a musician, the reason I stayed in Denver for so many years was the affordability and the cost of living here. And I could afford to go to a West Coast trip and hang out with my friends in San Diego and LA, and I grew up in the Bay Area, so I could afford to go back there several times a year and even make friends up north in Seattle, and afford to go to the East Coast. And I've even traveled to places like Haiti and Greenland, Iceland, Germany, because I was able to come home and have a reasonable rent and price of living. In the past 15 years, in the past really 10 years, those trips have almost stopped for me. Because I can't afford to leave my home. I can't afford to just come back and get a new apartment or rent a room. The accessibility and the affordability and having an invisible disability is something that, I can't really put that on an application. And the way that the mayor and the government and some of these policies that are being made, it's just stacking, it's really stacking it against us. And as an indigenous two-spirit storyteller, it's getting harder and harder and harder just to not even thrive, right? And that's something that my ancestors have taught me, not to just live a life of survival, but of thriving. And so I would love a more equitable community where I can afford to stay delivering babies here, where I can afford to stay teaching your children, like the rock camps I was doing, where I can afford to put on free shows. I don't know how much longer that's going to be able to last at the rate that Denver has afforded me in the past 20 years. So looking 20 years forward, I don't know. But the diversity and the equity and the children, and I mean the young 20 years olds, that are coming up, they make me want to stay here. I don't want to leave my home. And so I'm hoping that we can all have these conversations and learn a little bit more about how to create the world that we really want to see, and that as artists, we get our time back,
Well put. That's an amazing point. And as far as coming up in the music community, and I grew up in Central Oregon, and I moved here about 10 years ago. And in Central Oregon at the time, in the punk rock community, I think that just feeling like I didn't belong to society, I didn't belong to the school, I didn't I didn't fit in. Having the ability to walk into a room and see people that are just friendly, I think is one of the biggest barriers. Feeling like you don't belong to any group or any clique can be just enough to keep you silent and not express your art or your music to the community. And I think what Punk Rock Saves Lives tries to do is be there for you when you walk into the room and you see them there. At least you know you have some friends to go talk to, you know. Just because it's called Punk Rock Saves Lives doesn't mean it's only one style of music, you know. I believe that music is for everybody, and that, you know, I'm a big fan of all types of music. And I think that getting out there and just being friendly and just talking to people is one of the biggest things you can do to help people feel like they belong, feel like they fit in.
All right, so I'm gonna completely shift tonal gears here. Talk about like sexual violence as being a big barrier, because it's also often like wherever there's power and wherever there's power imbalances, we find sexual violence. Right, because we know sexual violence is about the expression of power. It's not about sex, it's not about desire, it's about power. And that power gets used to shape like which people are allowed in which spaces. Right, like the person who gets catcalled every time they go out in public is gonna go out in public less. They're gonna make themselves smaller, gonna take up less space. And we see this disproportionately happening to minoritized people, right? The people who are on the margins of society. So with women, we see it with people of color, we see it with people with disabilities, we see it with the LGBTQ plus crowd. And you know, the more intersections between those identities people have, the unfortunately less power they have and the more often they experience problems. So I think part of, you know, expanding the music community is to like make sure that we are being aware that that is a tool of control, and working with communities to like raise awareness, learn how to intervene in safe ways, and really like look out for each other, because that's the only way it's really gonna change.
So I'm going to answer this question in two ways. One is the ableist expectation in the music industry, right? Until you make it big, your needs are not to be shared. You are to show up, work extensively hard, not complain, not think about your body, and come back the next day and do it again. Until you're a superstar, you can say, hey, I need this, that, and this. And so I think that's a huge, huge barrier, right? Like just the expectation, the ableism built into the system. And then I'm going to say the ableism built into the spaces and the rules and regulations, right? Like this step here. This is a classical stage, right? And somebody who uses a device has a hard time stepping up. And there are real reasons to have stages and to raise people up. But there are barriers, right? And our venues, most of them are not built in the last 5 years. And even when they are built, they still are incredibly hard on the body. And until spaces are a love letter to the body, there are going to be barriers for musicians in the rigor of the work they do.
Hello? Okay. Sorry, definitely should have grabbed this earlier. I appreciate all of you sharing and being vulnerable for a moment, sharing your own experiences as well. And I feel like something I heard in each of y'all's sharings is this idea of how certain societal values around power and ableism and homelessness and just different things that are happening in society and how they are filtering into this music community, and how that is really just erasing certain folks from this community and limiting their ability to share their experiences in such a healing way. And going back to power, Kiersten, I'm wondering if you could use your expertise in community safety and being an active bystander, and how do we intervene when in these spaces and we see these power dynamics that are leading to harmful and, in certain cases, dangerous situations?
Yeah, so I think one of the most important things that we can do is to increase recognition of when harmful things are happening, because we have a lot of stereotypes about sexual violence in particular that are just false, and that shapes the way that we recognize harm when it's happening. So we just did a training at Love It Pavilion, and we talk about how, like, and say there's the like cultural belief that sexual violence is like the stranger hiding in the alleyway, but 80% of the time people know the person who attacked them. And so like paying attention even to people who come into venues together. Like just because they came in together doesn't mean that harm is not gonna happen. So increasing recognition, or like looking at non-stereotypical dynamics, right? So we very rarely think about, women sexually assaulting men, or women assaulting other women, or men assaulting other men, right? And that's not even touching the trans and non-binary folks. So increasing recognition, and then in terms of intervention, say we have what we call the 5 Ds. So we have direct intervention, which is if you see something that looks harmful or looks like it might be harmful, just going in, being like, hey, don't do that. Or, hey, are you okay? Then we have delegating, which is if it is not safe for you to directly intervene because of your social position, because of the power dynamics involved in the people that's happening to, delegating is getting help, getting someone else who can come intervene, whether that is like security or someone in charge of running something, or just like a friend who's really good at directly intervening. Increasing the size of the group that's calling something out is a really critical piece. Then we have distract, which is just causing a distraction to interrupt the energy of a potentially harmful interaction. And, the world is your burrito on that one. Like, just create space between the people. Ask someone, like, hey, can I borrow your phone? Or, like, the classic, pretend that you know someone, to just, like, remove them from a situation that looks like it's making them uncomfortable. And so a very memorable middle school seminar, a kid said that they would pour olive oil all over themselves and run screaming through the room. It's like, you know what? That would be very distracting. Like, people would, that would disrupt the energy of whatever was happening. Now you're covered in olive oil, but you do you, kid. Then we have the sort of further removed strategies of document and delay, So if it's impossible to intervene in the moment, to document, like take note of the day, the time, what people looked like. If you're in a space where it's allowed, like grab a photo. And then if you can, share that later with someone who's investigating, or if something bad happens to someone you know, you can give it to them. And then a delay is just to check on someone after the fact. You know, make sure they're okay. Be like, you know, I saw what happened. What do you need from me? And just sort of wrap that up. We know that 90 to 98% of the time, people are telling the truth when they say that they've been sexually assaulted, the same as all other violent crimes. And so if someone comes to you and tells you that they have experienced sexual violence, the three best things you can do are say, I believe you. It's not your job to investigate whether it's true or not. It's not your fault. And how can I help? And we know that if people hear those three things, they're more likely to get additional help. They're more likely to utilize available resources. And overall just have like a better healing experience.
Thank you for sharing those specific techniques that we all can use when we are in these spaces, Kiersten. A couple things I heard in what you shared is really the value of community and looking out for one another. And really that made me think of Punk Rock Saves Lives. And Jamin, you mentioned that Punk Rock Saves Lives tends to try to be the first people folks see when they enter a space, and really create that community for maybe folks who don't know people there, and really kind of generate that there's someone here for you feeling. And I'm wondering if you could talk about how you've seen in your experience and your work through Punk Rock Saves Lives, how can the industry enhance support for musicians who are struggling with their mental health or trying to be sober in these spaces? And yeah, I'm wondering if you could talk more about that.
Yeah, on my own personal journey from like punk rock musician to, I mean, I still am a punk rock musician, but when I started off, I drank a lot. I was in a band called Larry and His Flask. I think normalizing sobriety is super important in these communities. I think that it's okay. It should be known that it's okay to go have a good time and party and dance, and you don't have to be drunk. You don't have to be on drugs. Punk Rock Saves Lives does support everybody in the way that you can come to the booth and get test strips if you need them for drugs, just to make sure that there's no fentanyl in there. We have Narcan at the booth as well, all for free. So there are harm reduction supplies available. But for me, when I quit drinking, I felt like I lost all my friends. Almost everybody that I thought was really close to me walked away. And it took me a couple of years to realize that they weren't really my friends, you know. And I think that being on stage, being drunk, getting used to that lifestyle, doing drugs, and then the change into being more mindful and sober more often, it's really important for everybody to realize that that's okay. And it's also okay to drink, you know, if it's all done the right way, you know. I don't hold it against anybody that does consume drugs or alcohol. It's just, in my case, I did way too much. And so coming to that realization that you can still be a musician, you can still be a performer, an artist, part of the mosh pit, and you don't have to be wasted. And to be there for somebody that is having these questions like, I want to sober up, but I feel like I have to keep drinking. You know, that old thing where peer pressure does happen, and it sometimes happens by accident. You know, you just want everybody to have a good time, so you're like, come on, have a drink. And that pressure can make people pull away from the community, pull away from the group, and stay at home. And I really don't want that to happen to anybody. I want everybody to come in and have a good time and feel like they can be part of the show, they can be part of the dance floor, and not feel that pressure to be wasted. And I can tell you from experience that you can have just as much fun. I believe more. You know, people say that, but I can remember the fun I had now. So I think sobriety is, I think it should be normalized in communities. And you're seeing more of it now with bars that are non-alcoholic bars. You know, they have mocktails, and mocktails are available at a lot of bars now. And it helps because, I mean, look at this. This looks like a beer, and it's everywhere, and I feel a little bit better. I know it feels silly, but it helps me feel like, I mean, I know I'm part of the group, but it just makes me feel comfortable. Having something in your hand when you're talking to people at the bar feels more comfortable. So I think that's how we can all help, is just recognize that everybody's there to enjoy the time. And I think too that when people first sober up, they just need somebody to talk to sometimes. So just make yourself a little bit available. If you see somebody feeling uncomfortable, just be like, hey, what's going on? How are you doing? You know, and start the conversation.
Thank you, Jamin, and thank you for speaking on your own personal journey and the things you've seen and experienced within these spaces. One thing that really stood out to me is kind of, you pointed out how someone's intention in getting you involved in the space and the language being used, how even though there is that intention, that language itself can be isolating. And Melissa, to shift to you, you have a very intentional title. And I was wondering if you could speak on how you came to the musical doula as your title, and the importance of deliberate and supportive language within the music community. Yeah.
I'm just still listening to all the downloads, so thank you all. I was actually working with a local business coach, and you know, I do so many things. I'm a creative in every single way, right? I was just making salsa before I got here, you know, like just always doing something creative or pretty food or something. And I was really trying to narrow down, you know, what that next chapter of my life really could be. And so made a list of 100 things that I could do, narrowed it down. And when it came time to choose music or doula, I just couldn't. And I think what serves me is being able to embrace both creative side and whatever that looks like. So music is always going to be me. I am music, she is me. And the doula, it really gives me an opportunity to serve in a way from birth till grave is the teachings. And so when I am looking back at the inclusive language, it has been very limiting at times in a colonial aspect. But if we look back at the pages of history just a little bit, it was actually very balanced, and it was very inclusive. And even though Two-Spirit is a relatively new term coined in the 1990s, we have shown signs of these creators, these providers, these protectors, these people who were able to do so much for the community, and they were honored. And when I learned about that term, and when I really learned about that role in the community of being in your divine masculine, in your divine feminine, and using the balance to serve the people. So using these inclusive terms, birthing person, laboring human, chest feeding. I work with diverse families of all sorts of lenses, and really the goal is the Lakota teaching of 7 generations healing ourselves so that we can heal the 7 generations that came before us. And I know that we are so powerful that we can heal the 7 generations that come after us. And I'm inviting ourselves to even play 11, 22 generations into the future and really do the work now. So to answer your question, it's really important for us to update our operating systems. That's all it is. So if you are working with older folks who just can't update it, I told my grandmother a story of using the telephone and how sometimes I just need to text. It's just a little bit easier for me. And when I update my own operating system, it allows me relatableness. It allows me authentic connection. And so when we're dealing and inviting these spaces with non-binary or younger siblings that are playing with new identities and not playing but embracing identities, and I will ask them, hey, what would you like me to call you today? Because it could be different from what I called them yesterday. I could really be in my divine masculine, even though I'm wearing lipstick and eyeliners and I did my brows that day. And I love it when people just, hey, what do you want me to call you today? Mel. Okay, I'm feeling more Mel than Melissa today. And to me, those simple terms create trust. They allow us to be able to see and be seen while always listening. And so for me, if in the future I'm looking out in the camera here, if there's anything I ever do or say into the future, call me out and call me in. Ask me if I have a moment to update my operating system. I do. And I hope in the future I will. So I invite all of you to use these terms. Use them with the younger siblings. Use them with your partner. Use them with yourself, with your inner dialogue. And for us older folks, I'm in my 40s now, so I'll include myself in that baby elder. Sometimes it just takes a moment, or 2, or 3. So thank you.
Thank you so much, and I really love that verbiage of updating your operating system. And from that, I'm really hearing the power in flexibility and just being willing to offer grace, kind of in that calling in type of language. And I'm gonna pass it to Jessica. You earlier mentioned how even in venues, like how they were built in the past and are not updated to be accessible for folks. And in hearing about updating our operating systems, I'm wondering if you can talk more about how event organizers can do better to be flexible and accommodate for folks with disabilities or invisible illnesses. Yeah.
So as you know, I love to think about space as a love letter to the body. And the beautiful, wonderful thing about festivals is that we do them yearly, that they're not in built concrete space. They get rethought about. The operating system gets rebuilt in part and parcel and in whole every time. So every time we can come to the festival anew, accessibility is a community engagement process. And so the first step is to really notice who comes, who's here, right? Who's able to be their full self and tell their full story, and who, in the ways we build our festivals, face barriers there, right? That's the first step. And the second step is to really take note of who's not and why. What are the barriers? And then how do we get them there? So we get the first step, and what we've been involved in is gathering information, right? What is the actual physical space? What are the processes and procedures? We, as our access team, go out and look. We invite other people. We have surveys. My biggest job, I think, on the ground is to build relationships with staff and vendors and anybody, all the participants. Because I just talk to everybody. We have these fans, and last year they were these great talking tools because it was so hot everywhere. So I could just say, hey, have a fan, and how's it going, and how's your body, right? I have license to ask people how their bodies are in this space. And so I build relationships. Very much what you do, right? Very much what you do. That is the basis of accessibility. And then thinking about safety. Safety is not a separate issue. Accessibility and safety go hand in hand. And if you put accessibility at the center of your safety plan, it's going to look a little different. And so that's kind of where I am in this moment. And I'm going to say we need to think about each and every group of people who are at a festival to make it accessible, right? If we only think about the patrons, we're only thinking about one part. We really need to think about staff, right? It's a very, very intense thing we do. It is very, very hard on the body and the mind, and we need to take breaks. And we need to notice the heat and the loudness. And, I use a scooter because of this festival, and I recommend that lots of people use scooters. And I'm starting to feel like I'm taking up too much space. So I think, let me just make sure I've answered the question, because we're here at UMS, and we're on year 2 of our accessibility journey. Accessibility is a journey. It's not a checklist. You're going to get people in the door, and you're going to notice something different. You're going to have a pandemic, and you're going to have a whole slew of new disabilities. Disabilities I hope you're taking away from my talk isn't an individual problem, but it is the relationship between human beings and their environment and each other. And so it's always changing, and if embraced, can be an incredible source of creativity. There you go.
Thank you so much, Jessica, for sharing that. And I feel like one thing I really took from everything you shared is that need for accountability even, and how the need for accountability needs to be kind of a norm within the community we are building. And also the understanding that with accountability, for it to be productive, needs to come grace as well. And that acknowledgement of we're never going to be perfect, but we have to be willing to update our operating system. So another question for all of y'all, kind of following up on that, is looking towards the future, and not only to build brave, safe, inclusive, and accessible community spaces for us, how do we continue this to impact future generations of musicians and music lovers? What would you say is one concrete, critical cultural norm that needs to become more normalized in these spaces?
I have a general, just, we have to take away the idea of bad singing. And that there's a special place to sing. We should sing to each other the way we talk to each other. It's just a part of human communication.
Thank you, Jessica.
Say, kind of similarly, but I think that one of the most important things to do is to remember that we are a community, and that as such, we all need to be keeping an eye on each other and like maintaining those relationships between people, because a lot of change really only works if we're all in it together. Doesn't necessarily work great if it comes from like the top down, but from the bottom up.
Thank you.
I don't think I really need the mic. I'm kind of loud, but I was just going to say all of these awesome, powerful people up here on stage with me have such important things to say. I want to thank you all for your input here. I feel that, like, I'm substituting for Rob Rushing, who is the founder of Punk Rock Saves Lives. He wasn't able to be here today, and I feel a little bit out of depth, so I appreciate your kindness in listening to what I have to say, but these people here are very powerful and amazing, so I want to thank you for everything you say and do here in our community. And I think that as far as steps for the future go, it's just listening to one another. That's the most important thing that I think humans should start to finally do, is really listen. Listen to what we need and what we want, and then make steps to achieve those things. I think it's very achievable, it just needs to start with the listening.
Thank you, Jamin, and thank you for your presence. It is valuable.
So I've been thinking about this question a lot, and I think it really boils down to being an open vessel. And in the words of one of my teachers, abre la puerta del corazón. Open the door of the heart. And I think as creators, we are the instruments. And our dreams, they want to be lived through us. And so being an open vessel and knowing what I need and being really honest with that. I needed sobriety. I needed to find that clarity, and I needed to find the humans who wanted to be on that journey. And listening is my next point, and listening is what the need is. A lot of times as creators, we want to paint with this color, but what does the audience need of us? And I think that's a certain point as a creative in my vintage wine stage is no longer just telling my story and needing it to be heard in that validation, but wanting to set the table for other people to come and feel comfortable and feel vulnerable enough to talk about sexual trauma, to share their disabilities, to share their invisible disabilities and have them met, have their needs met with kindness and love. That's really what we're talking about. The last thing, as a creator, my future ancestors, when we're creating, whatever your platform is, whatever your thing is, create a relay race where if you are the one running the fastest, running the hardest, if that's the administration or getting the money or inviting people to the table or cleaning up afterwards, know you can only run that race for a limited time. It could be a season, it could be 40, it could be 90. And know when to pass that baton to the next person. And let them run that race. Let them do it on their own. Let them fail and fall forward. And pass it to the next person and the next person. So that's really been the success of some of the things that I'm doing, is being able to drop out and do my self-care and knowing that's not failure, that is still going on. That party's still happening. That once a year event is still going to go on. That once a month thing, that connection is still going to happen. So thank you all for keeping your hearts, your minds, and your ears open with us this hour. I'm very blessed to be on stage with all of you. Thank you for bringing us together.
Thank you so much, and I want to echo that. I just feel honored being on this stage with y'all and hearing all of your experiences and witnessing your vulnerability and authenticity and desire to share with others what they can do to create relationship where everyone is invited. And before I open up for a question or two, I do want to give a chance if anyone would like to highlight their organization, talk a little bit about your work, or any other resources that could help folks further learn about how they can create this community.
And I realize I am not a singer, right? Like, I am the one who didn't get to be a singer because of the ableism. So this is the artwork I've been working on. My artwork is about the body being good. Momentum. So this is my song. The body is good and the body works. The body is good and the body works. Dancing and delighting, the body works. Dancing and delighting, the body works. I will respect your body, I will. I will respect my body, I will. Dancing and delighting, the body works. Dancing and delighting, the body works. Thank you all. And I do want to say this has been amazing to sit here and have this conversation with each of you.
Thank you, Jessica. That was a beautiful and relatable song.
Yeah, I'm going to be singing that all day in my head. So, the Blue Bench is Denver Metro's only sexual violence prevention and care center. We do a lot of good work, helped a lot of people. Just had our 40th birthday last year. So I'm kicking myself because I didn't bring hotline cards with me, but we have a 24/7 hotline. If you or anyone you know ever needs it, you can find it at our website, which is thebluebench.org. That's what we do.
Thank you.
Sorry, I was choking on some water there. Punk Rock Saves Lives is out at all the shows. We have chapters all over the country now, and we are there with harm reduction supplies for free, and we also swab your cheek for blood donor or bone marrow donor program so that you can potentially help save a life. So you can see us at most shows in the Denver metro area and all over the country now. So thank you for having me. Thank
you for being here.
So you can go to melissaivey.com, MELISSAIVEY, for all your birthing needs, for all your Olympias. I've been doing body work and getting more into my curandera work, which other people have called me, and so now I'm a little more comfortable saying that about myself. And, I think the life cycle is something to be honored and to be tended with, and we are not lone people. We are community. We are tribe. And so if you need birth, life, death, and all the things in between support, you have a doula at your service. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you all of you for being a part of this, for sharing your wisdom, and kind of just opening up a space for dialogue. And for everyone who joined us, thank you for joining us. And I would just like to empower you to take these conversations, take these techniques, and bring them out into these spaces and encourage others to do the same and allow others to take up space in these spaces. So, does anyone have any Q&A questions?
I believe we do this year. I need to check with Danielle. I just got back from Oregon. I was out there, so I believe we should be activating out there this weekend.
I love that y'all have Narcan at
Yep.
shows. I mean, I've seen it in boxes on walls at some venues, but I started carrying it when a couple years ago, and I just think, yeah, it's important that it's available. And it can be hard to get. You have to go to a pharmacy.
Yep.
I don't think you need a script necessarily in every state, but it's nice that y'all have it at the venue.
Yeah, and you can, I believe the ones that we have instructions inside, but you can also talk to anybody that works with us, and they're trained on how to use it. They can explain it too.
And if I could jump in, you are correct. You do not need a script for Narcan. And if you happen to notice our resource board over by the computer lab, there are actually QR codes that direct you to an organization that will give you free Narcan. Any other questions? Yeah?
I'm just curious if someone from panelists could talk to a moment where they felt like there was an exceptionally safe space created for them or for others. Just for your calling for more of those moments in our community.
This moment.
You're gonna make me start crying. I'm gonna try not to start crying. We're recording here.
So many moments are flooding through my mind right now. After the COVID pandemic, like we were all released from our timeouts, I was just really called to create a BIPOC open stage. And I've been hosting on and off at the Mercury Cafe for 20 plus years. And it was calling me back. It was calling me, the walls were calling me back. And I did not anticipate the level of vulnerability that people were going to go to those depths. And I did not anticipate the quickness. And so we just celebrated our 2-year anniversary. It's a monthly open stage every second Thursday right now at the Mercury Cafe through Bodies of Culture. But there was a night where this young person came on stage for one of the first times. And I started hearing music in my head immediately. And I started hearing the rhythms and the tempos. And I started seeing colors around this person. And of course, I didn't tell them all that after they got off stage. But months later, developing an authentic relationship, I was able to record these poems and put the music in my head. And we released an album for Sincerely Sparrow because it felt good, because it had to come through me and her, because the muse wanted to play through us so hard. There was nothing about money. There was nothing about, we have an agreement 50-50. All of her words are hers. All of the music is mine. But that's not why we did it. And so I want to create and be a part of more of those experiences. And I want to be able to produce more artists that I believe in and that I hear what is almost going to be born. So that is my challenge and my invitation to join these spaces and continue to be amazed by my siblings. So thank you for bringing all the flood of memories back, but that one very much sticks out in my mind and in my heart, I think, forever.
Thank you for sharing.
So, at the tail end of the pandemic, I organized a festival at the Kennedy Center. And the Kennedy Center is in DC. It's our national community center, is what performing arts center. That's how I like to think about it. And they have a stage called the Millennium Stage, where it's the people's stage. Like, anyone can go and see things there. And we got to have an evening of performance there. I got to perform in a play as a narrator. But I remember looking out, and there were people with all kinds of abilities and disabilities, and thinking, we are not a sideshow here. People aren't coming to this space because we're oddity. They're coming to this space to connect and engage and respect. And that was sacred. And as much as integration is important, having these spaces where we are with our people, however you define that, like, and having one foot in and one foot out, right? Like, is magical.
So we go to a lot of different spaces. But I think we just did a training with Levitt Pavilion. I think I mentioned that already. Working with the bar staff who, like, in the interest of building safer communities, especially around alcohol, but just like the buy-in from all the staff was just absolutely incredible. Like, this was like a room full of people who were like, yes, we really actively want to be working towards making this be a safer venue and a safer space. And like I say, it's not the type of space we usually train, so that was a learning experience for us as well. But just like the level of commitment, the level of interest everyone had really was heartening.
Thank you all for sharing those moments, and can we please just have a moment to recognize these amazing folks and their ability to not only raise awareness, provide education, but just create a authentic, vulnerable, compassionate space. I think we really need to give it up for these folks.